This is Casey McBride with the NationalCrimeSyndicate.com. Welcome to Uncle Frank's Place. This is episode 2 of our series on mob movies. And today, I wanted to have a little bit more in-depth conversation with my own co-host on the show, Mike Maffucci. Mike is not only a big student and fan of the history of the American mob, but he's also a big fan of mob movies, and he's been in a few himself, so I figured he'd be a good guy to talk to on this subject. Mike's a stablemate of mine at the NationalCrimeSyndicate.com and also at Frank's Place. You can also catch him at the Murta Social Club, Scarpa Crew Social Club, and the Wise Guys Social Club on Facebook. And we also have with us our good friend Larry Henry, the man behind the Mob World Summit back in June in Vegas, and he writes the blog for the Mob Museum's website, and his blog is called The Mob and Pop Culture, so we figured he'd be a perfect guy to talk to about this. You can also find Larry at newsbreaker.com. He has an article called The Mafia Chronicles, and also the Las Vegas Mafia History page on Facebook. So just like Mike, Larry's got his fingers in a lot of pies out there in this digital world. So at the end of this episode, we included a little song that we'd like to dedicate to our guest, Larry. He's from Louisiana, and once you hear the whole interview, it'll make a little bit more sense, I promise. But without further ado, here is episode 2 of Mob Movies. Hope you guys enjoy it. So tonight with us, we've got my co-host and good friend, Mike Maffucci, who's been on numerous shows with us in the past, generally as a fellow co-host here, but tonight he's going to be kind of in the hot seat himself, and I wanted to talk to him a little bit about this topic of mob movies. The reason that is Mike's kind of got a unique relationship, not only with his interest in the history of the mob, but also with the cinema side of the whole genre. So, Mike, tell us a little bit, like, what's the first mob movie that you remember seeing? Like, were you always interested in this topic from movies? You know, tell us a little bit about your history with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think with most people, I'm 52. So I think with most people my age and maybe a little bit older, it starts with The Godfather. It has to. I know some of the younger guys maybe don't like it as much. You know, they like Goodfellas and Casino and those movies. But for me, it's the granddaddy of them all is The Godfather. And that's really what got me started with it.
Yeah, I think that got a lot of people started, like you're saying. You know, especially if you're of a certain age. That movie was unavoidable for a while. You know, it was everywhere.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and so much of it, I think, is kind of permeated into, you know, just our everyday lives. That, you know, the scene with the horse head and the make an offer you can't refuse, all that stuff. You know, that comes up every day still. So that movie was a big one.
It's part of pop culture.
Absolutely. Now, I think you've kind of answered this one time in a past show, but were movies kind of what got you interested in this genre?
Yeah. Even though my family, who's Italian and from the Bronx, was never involved in anything, so I didn't grow up around, mob guys and, didn't know about social clubs and all that. It really was the movies for me.
Yeah, me too.
As a matter of fact, my grandfather, when he was raising his family, my father and his siblings, they were actually told to stay away from those people. Quote unquote, those people.
Yeah, right. That's a problem we don't have as much over here on the West Coast. Like, growing up, I think it just wasn't, it's not, around as much. But, being that you're from the East Coast, that's a completely different world from where I grew up. So for me,
right.
it was certainly movies were what kind of was my first, taste of all this kind of stuff. But now you not only are a fan of these movies, you've been in a few. Again, now we've talked a little bit about this, but tell us a little bit more about this. You were recently did some filming for The Irishman, which is coming out hopefully sometime in the future.
But, yeah, hopefully eventually.
Yeah, tell us about that. Like, how did you get that, and what was it kind of like on the set and actually making a movie?
Yeah, it was another just right place, right time. Somebody sent me a article on the internet talking about this movie that Scorsese was making, and at the bottom it says, they're going to be looking for extras. If you're interested, send them an email with your picture, blah blah blah. So I did that, and didn't hear anything back for a while, a couple months at least. And so I figured, oh well, no big deal. But then I get a text message from the casting company asking me if I was still interested. So obviously I was. So they had me for one scene which got canceled, and I was a little disappointed, but they came back and said, we have this other one. It's going to be a week-long shoot. Most of the scenes I knew about that were already filmed were like one day, so now they're telling me there's a week-long shoot, and am I interested? So once I made sure I could take vacation from my job, I told them, yeah, for sure. So, I filmed with pretty much all the big guys that are in the movie, Pesci, De Niro, Pacino. All of them were in this scene that I filmed with them I was there for 6 days, actually.
Wow. So, was it fun or was it boring, like just sitting around while they're moving lights around and adjusting things?
To be, go behind the curtain, as they say, it was so boring and tiring. I was wore out. But it was boring. It's mostly sitting around waiting for things to happen. You're not allowed to talk to the main actors, especially De Niro. They really told you try not even to look at him unless you're in the scene with him.
Wow.
So it was kind of disappointing, for that, because I thought I would actually get to meet these guys, and they're standing 5 feet away from me, but I didn't actually get to meet them. You know what I mean?
Right.
The only one I actually talked to was Patrick Borriello, who's been in a lot of movies, and the son of a mobster, Bobby Borriello. I got to talk to him briefly because a mutual friend, although she's only a friend of mine on Facebook, but a mutual friend reached out, said, if you see him, tell him I said hello. So, I did that.
Nice. It's always good to know somebody, even if it's just on Facebook, see?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, yeah, it's, I can't wait to see this movie. It's just going to be weird, though, watching this and all of a sudden seeing you in it. When you get into a movie, my brother is in the movie Heat briefly, and every time I watch that movie, I get wrapped up in it, and then all of a sudden I see his face, and I'm like, it's jarring because it's somebody that you know so well. And then, it totally takes you out of the movie for a moment, and then you have to kind of get back into it. But
I hope being there for 6 days that I'm able to be seen.
Right. It sure gives you a new respect on like how hard it is to get a movie made or what they go through. I mean, when you think about it, that's one scene and it's taking a week to film. It's amazing to me that they get made at all. So many people are involved, so much time. It's a huge process, but
and the money. Now I understand now why it cost them over $100 million to make this movie.
Yeah, unbelievable, the money that goes into these things. But now you've also done something kind of on the other end of the spectrum, too, which on a more independent level, without the big budgets and the big stars and stuff, too. You've done 2 movies where, again, you play a mob guy. Tell us just a little bit about that again.
Yeah, the first one I did, it's a mob movie called Mi Familia by writer, director, producer Joe Simonera, who's a Long Island guy. Basically no budget. He gets locations through word of mouth. He has this group of people that are willing to film with him, and he did this movie. So I'm in like 2 scenes in that movie. I just play a guy busting into a social club and get to hold somebody up against the wall with a gun. Yeah, and then later on in the movie.
Nice.
No,
you're not a nice guy in that movie.
And then later on in the movie, I actually get shot in 2 different spots, which is a little interesting.
And then, and so, but you're playing the mob guy again in his next movie too, which isn't necessarily a mob movie, but there's a mob character in it that you get to portray.
Yeah, it's actually I don't know what you would want to call it, a psychological thriller, I guess. It's called Somnium, again by Joe Simonera, and the basic storyline is these three guys bust into this big house to rob it, and these two twin girls that are about 13, 14 years old are there, and they have this power to make you hallucinate that something else is happening that's not actually happening. So the scene that I'm in, this one character hallucinates that he goes into this club that his father has, and his father's a mob boss. And I'm standing at the door basically making sure, people don't come in who don't need to be coming in. So I actually get one line in this movie, my first line, and a little action, too. I get to whack this guy across the face, which was kind of fun.
See, you're moving up, man. You're getting lines and action scenes. You're going to have a stunt double pretty soon. This is great. But so just kind of, tell me, why do you think it is that you get these roles as these mob guys? I mean, you definitely have the look from some of the pictures, that we put up on Facebook, just, from the still shots from Mi Familia and stuff. It looks to be like, I could see you in one of those surveillance photos from the Gotti era, you'd fit right in there. So, I mean, do you think that's kind of what helps you get these roles?
Yeah, that's all. It's, it's racial profiling. But
I get it in a good way this time.
But in a good way.
Yeah, you get a movie out of it. That's awesome. Well, and I know you turned down one that you turned down that Melissa McCarthy was in too. That was a big budget one too, which that was kind of too bad. But like I said, I think it's a sign that maybe these will just keep coming though. As long as now people know that you're out there and you're dependable, you'll show up and not be a problem on a set. Hopefully you'll get more of these if that's what you want to do. That'd be cool to see.
Yeah, definitely didn't turn it down because I didn't want to do it. I just, just wasn't a good time for me, unfortunately. I do have a real job and a real life, so.
That's one of the things I want to talk, when we talk with Gary Pastor about, is, when you're trying to hold down a life and then, last minute you have to try to take these auditions and do these movies. The schedules are really difficult. So it's not easy to do if you want to keep pursuing it. You really got to make a commitment to make a couple sacrifices. And like you said, it's long days. It's hard work. Even if it is just sitting around, it's tough to do, for 12 hours. It's hard to keep your energy up.
Yeah, we had on the Irishman, we basically ranged from 13 to 15 hours a day.
Man, this is crazy. Wow. But, well, that's awesome. So now for our next guest that we've got here with us today, he's been real quiet and polite there in the background. We got a friend, Larry Henry, who I had the pleasure of actually meeting in person last June at the Mob World Summit in Vegas, which he was the man behind the whole thing. And boy, it was a lot of fun. How are you doing tonight, or this morning, excuse me, Larry?
Doing great, Casey. Good talking to you and Mike again.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you taking the time to do this. Now, one of the reasons that we wanted to have Larry on the show, not just because he's a buddy of ours, but he is actually the man behind the blog for the Mob Museum, the Mob in Pop Culture, as well as his article, The Mafia Chronicles and Newsbreaker. He's got a Facebook page, Las Vegas Mafia History, and also Mob World. So kind of like Mike, he's got his fingers in a lot of pies out there on the internet. But this new gig you're doing for the Mob Museum with the Mob and Pop Culture, I thought you'd be a great person to talk to for this show. So I was going to ask you a couple of the same questions here that I've asked Mike. I mean, first of all, what do you remember about getting into mob movies? Is it something that you've always, been interested in? Do you remember like the first one you saw? Tell us a little bit about your background there.
Well, probably like Mike and many people, The Godfather also. I grew up in Louisiana. When I grew up, Carlos Marcello was the mob boss in New Orleans. And so I remember, you just always heard about that. And I didn't understand public corruption then. I later became a journalist and covered those sort of things. But before those years, growing up, you wondered why people like that were able to get away with what they got away with. Everybody was sort of afraid of this figure in New Orleans. And even where I grew up in Baton Rouge, there were people, Barry Seal, who was a cocaine importer from Colombia, and then as I joined the Marine Corps and came back and went to LSU and was more educated about how things worked. And so always was interested in public corruption. And as our friend Dan Modea says, you can't have organized crime without various levels of corruption. And so then became a journalist and covered those sort of things and was always interested in it, Casey. I think the first movie, like Mike, was The Godfather, which really showed how had a lot of different elements to it, obviously, but one of the things I think it did a good job of getting at is the way organized crime figures have a lot of influence over politicians and prosecutors and judges, and I think that's always sort of what drew me to the genre.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. Now, with what you're doing, tell us a little bit about what you're doing with the Mob Museum with this blog and the mob and pop culture, like kind of what it is that you're trying to kind of cover with that.
Well, that's it got started about 10 or 11 months ago, I think, with Jeff Schumacher. I worked with Jeff. Jeff is the senior content director at the Mob Museum. As you know, Casey was with us at the Mob World Summit. And it's always, Jeff and I worked together at the Las Vegas Sun years ago. He was the city editor, the Metro editor, and I was the political editor. And so we, over the years, have had a shared interest in literature and movies and things like that. When I started writing this monthly column for the Mob Museum, it was to look at different things, not just movies, although the logo has a film reel and most of the pieces somewhat center on movies, if not all of them. I think mention movies to some degree, but also books. I did a piece about George V. Higgins, the novelist whose work has also been translated into film, and I've got one coming up this month on Ouija, the photographer from Mike's neck of the woods, New York City, who covered that sort of dark pre-film noir tabloid newspaper world of New York City in the 30s and 40s. So it's kind of touching month by month on things that are topical. I did the Ouija piece because a new book has come out on Ouija by the city editor of New York Magazine. The month before that, the one that's up there now, is on The Deuce with Gary Pastor and playing Matty the horse and obviously a lot of other people. But so I try to find something that's topical, that's coming up that month or advancing it. I did a piece on The Irishman, which Mike is in, sort of advancing the controversy over whether that book by Charles Brandt, I Heard You Paint Houses, about Frank Sheeran, The Irishman, is an accurate depiction of who killed Jimmy Hoffa. So I got back and forth in that whole issue. So yeah, that's sort of what it is, Casey. It's month by month, just looking at what's topical in the world of film and literature surrounding the mob.
Yeah, it's a really good article. I like it a lot. And it's, there's a lot of stuff to cover because, like we were mentioning earlier about The Godfather, that stuff has just kind of permeated into our everyday lives, through movies, books, and things like that. But I think certainly movies are probably the top, culprit in that. They're still pretty popular with everybody. Now, kind of along that line of what you were talking about, both of you guys, if you would chime in on this too, I'd like to get your opinions. When they make a movie like this, and like what you're talking about with The Irishman, is it accurate? What are the sources? What are your guys' opinion on, does a movie have to be 100% historically accurate, or do you mind if they take liberties and sometimes they're way off? Let's start with you, Mike. What's your opinion on that?
Well, if you want to make a movie that sells and is popular, it's probably better that it's not accurate because the real story is probably boring. My feeling is most of the movies that are based on true events probably aren't accurate. And being in the various mob groups that we're in, we hear that the people who know better than myself will say, well, that didn't really happen or whatever. And you know what? They're not making documentaries. They're making movies. The movies supposed to hold your interest. So, I've said it before, never let the facts get in the way of a good story.
Right.
So, as far as the movies go, to me, no, it doesn't have to be accurate facts-wise. It's a movie. If I'm watching a documentary, then, yeah, it better be factual. But the movies, to me, no, I want to see a good movie.
Right. How about you, Larry?
I agree with Mike. I think most of the movie-going public understands in a 2-hour fiction piece like movies are, that there will be liberties taken with the story. I think people understand that. Based on a true story, as Mike says, is different from a documentary, which needs to adhere more to journalistic standards and really be true. So, but it does create fun. Like Mike said, it's, a lot of the Facebook groups that we all are a part of, and I get into it in my monthly column for the Mob Museum. It's interesting to look at what's factual and what's not. I did a piece on Bugsy Siegel and whether the movie Bugsy was accurate. But I agree. At the end of the day, I agree with Mike. It's entertainment, and I think most people see it that way.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you guys this one. For me, this happens all the time now. Like when I used to watch these mob movies, I loved them. They were fun. They were super entertaining. And then once I started to get, a little bit of the background, it makes it harder for me to watch them now, because then I'm all like, wait, that didn't happen, or that's not right. And, then I end up picking the movie apart more than just, sitting back and enjoying the damn thing like you're supposed to. So, do you find yourself doing that when you watch these movies now?
Yeah, I'll laugh at certain scenes. Like for some reason, the one that sticks out of my mind is in the Armand Asante Gotti movie when Don Carlo brings Gotti in to tell him that he wants him to take care of McBratney, and he's talking about how that they shouldn't be dealing drugs, and I just sat there and laughed, because they all did it, and everybody knew they did it, but you just couldn't admit you did it, and you couldn't get caught doing it, but they all did it. So, I mean, to me, that was pretty funny.
Right. Yeah, the one that you were talking about, Larry, too, like Bugsy, that was really one of the ones. When that movie came out back in the day, I loved it. And they had a lot of buzz around it. It was a pretty big, it was an acclaimed movie, and I thought it was great. And then I watched it again, just a couple of years ago, since I've gotten more interested in this, and it completely changed the movie for me now. It's really hard for me to. I don't know that I enjoy it as much, if at all, now. Actually.
Well, the accuracy, there are a lot of truths stretched in trying to fit everything into that time frame. But I go back to what Mike said a moment ago about documentaries versus movies, and I know we're going to talk in a moment about our favorite movies. But you look at the movie Casino, which I think is great, and clearly the characters' names are changed and so forth based on a true story. Then you look at our friend Gary Jenkins, who I think is one of the best mob historians in the country. Gary's documentary on the Kansas City, Las Vegas Skim Pipeline, Casino Skim Pipeline, is just fabulous. It's in Gary's documentary, Gangland Wire. So when you look at comparing the documentary to the movie, I think there's a lot of ground you can make up on what the facts are. But I think when it gets right down to it, we all enjoy good movies, and you look at something like The Deuce, where there's another element at play. Gary Pastor plays a real historical figure in that fiction piece, The Deuce, and I think that's fun too. You've got fictional characters mixed in with historical characters. So I think if you look at a movie or a television series like that as fun, I think it's a lot more enjoyable.
Right. Now, how do you balance with your column, the history and the entertainment side? Because, you can't just write something that's going to be dry and boring. You want to be entertaining as well, but then you're dealing with, history and, like you say, facts. Now, how do you kind of balance the entertainment side with the reality side?
I just try to do it journalistically, Casey, the way, I've 30 some odd years as a as a journalist, I always just try to get both sides. Like the one on the Hoffa movie, The Irishman, the Scorsese movie that Mike's in. I just try to present both sides. That the book that the movie is based on is the telling of a Delaware Teamsters official who was a Philly-based mob hitman, really. And there's some on one side there are those who believe that what he said is true, Frank Sheeran. On the other side are people like Dan Modea who heavily investigated the Hoffa killing and Hoffa's background, wrote a great book called The Hoffa Wars in the 70s. And, Dan asserts that Sal Bergoglio did the killing. So I just try to present both sides and let the public sort it out. The movie is the thing about movies, and Dan Modea has said this, the thing about movies, because so much of what we absorb culturally, each of us, really is through movies more than novels and nonfiction books. Once a movie comes out, it's kind of culturally accepted as fact, and so
yeah.
part of that is trying to portray what both sides are, so that you can just present what both sides are.
Yeah, it's tough. It's amazing the power that movies have. You see that with this genre. There are so many people out there that you see, like what you're saying, that will start writing things or whatever in a group about, like, this is how it happens. Like, well, no, that's the movie. But, and I was the same way. Like, I always kind of thought, if it's in a movie, they must have done their research and they're trying to, get it as accurate as possible. And it's like, well, no, that's not necessarily the case all the time. So, but now here's the question for you guys. Have you guys both seen the new Gotti movie, right?
Yeah.
I've seen about half of it so far. I haven't gotten a chance
so you
to
haven't
finish it.
You haven't seen the whole thing. Well, what's your guys' opinion on? Well, you just tell us about what you've seen so far. But Larry, what was your opinion on the movie? Because there was so much controversy floating around about this movie. It was such a big deal for so many people. I mean, it's still showing up on on feeds and things like that on the internet. People are talking about this thing. What's your opinion of it, Larry?
I enjoyed it, man. I mean, I'm a big movie buff, and there was a lot about that movie I liked. I know when it comes to things like the Gotti movie, there are so many passionate opinions about Gotti. Nothing that any of us do and write about in the whole mob world gets as many clicks as anything on Gotti. So
right.
You're going to have people who are passionately pro Gotti, and you're going to have people who don't like Gotti. And so once you sort of wade through those two factions and try to look at it objectively about how he affected this country historically, I thought there was a lot about it that was good. I thought the acting was good. I enjoyed the way it was. So, to some degree, it was a little bit tough to tell what they wanted the focus to be, the filmmakers. Was it about John Gotti himself? Was it about his sons, which the movie was based on? His sons, sort of divorcing himself from the mob. Was it about? So it was a little bit. It jumped around a little bit in terms of the focus, but I enjoyed it, to be honest with you. I thought it was an interesting movie, and again, it's one more thing. George Anastasia, the Philadelphia journalist, said it right. Not everybody is interested in the mob. Like sports, though, while not everybody is interested in sports, those who are very, very passionate about it. And so I think, it's just one more thing that adds to the whole list of things in the mob world that those of us who are interested in it can sort of talk about it, and it's out there for us to be interested in.
Right. How about, so from what you've seen from it, Mike, just give us a little bit of what you think so far.
Yeah. Personally, if you saw the other Gotti movie with Armand Assante, what I've seen so far, to me, that one was much better. All right. Mm-hmm. I should say I enjoyed it more. Maybe it was more, it was more of a bigger budget. At least that's the way it seems. This movie seemed to be made a little more cheaply, I guess, from what I could see. But as far as just a movie, it's fine. I don't really have a big problem with it either way. But like Larry said, there's no gray area with Gotti. You know, either hate him or you love him, it seems like. So I think that's what you're getting from both sides. The ones who love him love the movie. The ones who hate him just hate the movie.
Right. It's like, well, Larry said too. I've always kind of drawn this parallel where it's totally like sports teams. When you start seeing some of these discussions, you know, people got their families that they like, they don't like, and the other ones that they don't like, or they got certain mobsters that they like, and the ones that they don't. And it's just like listening to guys, you know, bitch and moan about baseball or football, but, you know, Boston and the Yankees and stuff like that. So it's kind of funny. But I personally, I didn't mind the movie at all. I thought it was pretty good. That the one with Armand Assante was one that I watched having no expectations about it at all. I thought it was going to be kind of cheap and, you know, more like a made-for-TV thing. And I was shocked after watching that one. It was so good, you know. And I think that one's probably going to forever be the standard that they're going to make any kind of Gotti movie from. But you know, for all the bad press and things that the new Gotti movie got, I don't think it deserves as bad as it got. You know, people are saying it's the worst movie ever made, or even the worst mob movie made. It's by far not the worst mob movie that I've ever seen. I don't think. I can think of lots of other ones that were worse, but
well, passions are intense. We're all a part of the National Crime Syndicate Facebook page and website, and every time, you know, even a picture of Gotti, a story about Gotti, anything about the Gotti movie, you look at the number of, I mean, we all live in a world, we look at the number of clicks and so forth. It's just the way it is. Everything Gotti just gets an enormous amount of interest in everything. And like Mike just said, I think those who hate Gotti are just unbelievably vitriolic about the movie.
Yeah.
And those who really like Gotti are place it in the category of one of the great films of all time. So, you know, somewhere in the middle probably is what the truth is. You know, when you if you aren't a hater or you know, if you're not on one side or the other of that passionate debate, you know, you look at it objectively, it's not a bad movie.
Yeah. Now, this new documentary that's coming out about the Social Club sure looks interesting. I can't wait to see that. Yeah,
I saw the trailer. I'm definitely going to see it. I'm just not sure what they're going after with this, because there's parts of the trailer made me think it was going to be like a comedy.
That's kind of what they're going for, though. I listened to an interview with the guy who made it. He's like they just premiered it, I think, in down in L.A. the other night, and he was, you know, he was even saying it's like everybody laughed in the right places, and you know, it went real well. And so I think they're coming across as kind of a lighthearted approach to the thing, but it looks like they got some, you know, cool stories and some cool pictures about it. It's an interesting subject to make a little documentary out of, I thought.
Well, if they're going for a comedy, I hope they got the clip of the balloon delivery to the Social Club. I don't know if you guys have seen that before, but it's hysterical.
It's pretty brave of that guy to go up there and do that. I don't know if I'd do that for a prank. That's pretty funny.
Is that the guy? You're talking about the guy who asked, "Where's Tony?" Is that the? Oh,
no. Well, there's that. That's in the documentary. In the preview where the guy was talking about that. Yeah, but then there's another. There's an actual. It was like one of those television shows where they play pranks and, you know, and film it and everything. And they sent a balloon clown delivery to the Social Club. And what is it? Peter Gotti comes out. Is he the one who comes out? I can't remember.
Yeah, Peter's there.
It was pretty funny, but so kind of to wrap up here. Like we were going to say, I wanted to kind of go around the table here and find out. Well, first of all, even before I ask that question, I came up with just a new question here. I'll throw at you guys. So, out of new, you know, movies that we know are kind of coming out, what do you guys think looks good? What are you excited about seeing?
Well, I heard there's going to be a Chin movie coming out, which, you know, if you're going to make a mob movie, about time you make one about the Chin.
Right, that'd be good.
Was
How about you, Larry?
D'Onofrio? What's that actor's name?
Oh, right. And I think he would do good.
I'm looking forward to that one too, and I'm looking forward to, you know, we keep bouncing back and forth between films and documentaries, I'm looking forward to that Ravenite documentary coming out, which I guess got previewed in L.A. the other day to positive results. That's going to be interesting too.
Yeah, I think that looks real good. And this the Appalachian one, I think that looks really good too. It looks like they're making an effort to make it look realistic with the time. That's one pet peeve I have sometimes about movies nowadays. And I'm not going to name any names or anything like that, but there's been a few that I've seen, like when they do, the scenes that they have like modern suits on, and they, the guys, I've seen ones where like Luciano, or he's got a goatee and all this stuff, and I'm always like, there's a ton of pictures out there about these guys. Like, just look at the pictures and copy the pictures. I don't know why they don't at least make an effort to do that. And like looking at this Appalachian one, it really looks like, man, they've caught kind of the time period really well. So I'm hoping
Speaking of Gary Pastor, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think he's playing Anastasia again. So this will be the second time. I'll be looking forward to talking to him about that. But okay, so now we're getting down here to the end. I asked you guys to kind of come up with your 3 favorite mob movies of all time and your 1 favorite performance of a mobster. So we'll start with you, Mike. Give us your 3 and tell us a little bit about why.
Well, The Godfather for sure. I mean, that's self-explanatory. Number 1.
Right.
Now, there's also, and you guys have probably seen it. I think it's called The Godfather Legacy, maybe, where they take parts of 1 and parts of 2 and edit it together chronologically. And to me, I love that one. I mean, it's like you need a whole day to watch it because it's long, but I just love that one because Godfather 2 kind of bounces back and forth a lot.
Right.
So they took the early scenes from Godfather 2, put them in the beginning of this movie, and just kind of did everything chronologically. So no bouncing around, just the timeline, from start to finish.
I got to see this. That sounds awesome. What a great idea.
Yeah, and I love the Armand Assante Gotti movie. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that one's pretty mobby. That's the only way I can describe it. They really get down to some of the nitty-gritty stuff that I find interesting in this, just like the backroom talks and things like that. And, yeah, I thought they really captured the whole atmosphere of that pretty good.
And, of course, Familia, my big screen debut.
There it is, man. Hey, I like that movie. Now, I went into that knowing exactly what it was. It's a lower budget, it's a labor of love kind of movie.
Right.
And I thought they did exactly like what I was talking about, the Gotti thing. It might not have had a ton of action that you see in a lot of movies and things like that, but I really liked like all the backroom, backstabbing and plotting and things like that. I thought they did a good job with that, especially for what you guys had. So that's kudos to anybody that would even see that project from beginning to end and finish it. It's tough.
Yeah. And he finished that, and he did it in less than a year.
That's awesome. Yeah, you need to have a good group of guys that are willing to help you out with that. So, I'm glad that you guys are still making them and stuff. But, so how about your favorite performance of like individual mobster from somebody?
I would say Al Pacino in Godfather 2, the way he transformed and became to me the cold character that he became. To me, that's the best performance.
Good answer. All right.
Yeah.
How about you, Larry?
I agree with Mike's, and I think it's tough to argue against any of those. But 3 personal favorites of mine are The Godfather for the same reasons Mike mentioned, and it just opened the door to that whole genre. It really sparked the public interest. Next, Casino, my own background in Nevada, and just what the whole Tony Spilatro era and Lefty Rosenthal era was in Las Vegas. And I really like the way Nicholas Pileggi's book, the movie Casino, and Gary Jenkins' documentary, Gangland Wire, all 3 sort of interconnected. And I really like to sort of use those 3 to delve deeply into that whole world. And then my third one is not really a mob movie per se. It's The Friends of Eddie Coyle that has syndicate underworld figures as the overlords overseeing this crime scene in New England. It's just, to me, a really interesting look at the way the people who really do the trench work in the mob world don't have a glamorous, romanticized life by any stretch of the imagination. And I just thought Mitchum's performance in that was brilliant. Love that as among my favorite performances. I agree with Mike Pacino. And then I think Sharon Stone in Casino, that may be my top favorite performance. I thought she played a richly complex character who, again, just sort of underscores the tragedy of the involvement in that world.
Man, her character in that movie was just such a wonderful disaster. It's like, it's hard to watch. She's so good at that part, and it's sometimes you're just cringing at it. And I was like, man, I hated her in that movie so bad. And I'm like, wow, that's because she really nailed that performance. She definitely deserved the Oscar for that one. I thought she was great.
It was a brilliant performance.
Yeah, and I've never heard. I haven't seen it myself. It's definitely on my list. But the Friends of Eddie Coyle, I've never heard a bad word uttered about that movie either. Like anytime it comes up in one of the discussions, like it's just all of a sudden guys start jumping on, going like, "This is the best mob movie out there." So it really seems like that one's pretty widely accepted as one of the top ones. So I got to check that one out. Have you seen that one, Mike?
No, I've never seen it, but like yourself, anybody who I've heard has seen it, loved it.
Yeah, and that's all people I trust their opinion too. They all seem to really dig it. So I think with mine, I'm gonna have to go with the top ones. I'm splitting it, and I can do that because it's my show. But it's I've got to go with The Sopranos and the Godfather. I can't really decide which one I like better. I mean, The Sopranos, I got to give it up to them because they stayed really consistent for a lot longer. They had a lot more episodes to kind of do, and they rarely faltered, I thought, during almost all of their seasons. And The Godfather, for every reason that you guys have already mentioned. Out of any movie, those scenes in the Godfather 2 of him coming to America in the early days, those just get me. I just love the way that was done. And I think that's some of the coolest cinema ever. But I guess my number 2 would probably be maybe Bronx Tale. I really like a lot, and then my number 3, which isn't necessarily a mob movie per se, but I really liked it. Had kind of fun mob characters in it, and it was more of a comedy. But I loved The Midnight Run. I thought that's kind of an underrated movie.
Yeah.
I really dug that one. And I think for my favorite performance, again, I got a tie. It's got to be Johnny Sack in The Sopranos. That character was probably the reason that really started getting me into like studying more of the history of this stuff. And I know Gary's worked with him quite a bit, so I can't wait to talk to him about that. That'll be kind of fun. And then my other favorite one was Philip Baker Hall from the movie Hard 8, and he plays kind of an aging mobster in Reno and Las Vegas. And it's not a high action movie, but man, he's so good in that. And every time I watch it, if I was going to make my own dream movie and could have anybody from any time in my cast, he would be my Meyer Lansky. I think that the character he plays in there, he's just he's awesome.